Hello and welcome to Thoughts on Therapy. I'm Bryan Stevens, a licensed professional counselor with a practice in Marietta, Georgia, and the founder of TalkForward, who is bringing us this podcast today. I've been active in behavioral health for over 25 years, and in that time, I have met all sorts of knowledgeable people. Thoughts on Therapy is the show to bring their knowledge to the general public. Today, we're talking with Cynthia Schwartzberg about authenticity. Cynthia is a licensed clinical social worker and a well-recognized leader in the groundbreaking brain spotting field. She spent decades using brain spotting and other highly regarded techniques to help individuals and couples discover their authentic selves and lead richer, freer, and more meaningful lives. Cynthia is currently a practicing therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, who delights in the voyage of authenticity she and her clients embark on daily. Using the latest in neuroscience as well as ancient wisdom traditions from around the world, she's devoted her life to going as far as possible into the experiences of both curiosity and wonder. She is the author of The Curious Voyage, a rule-breaking guidebook to authenticity, which she calls a resource for the courageous explorer. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to be talking to you about authenticity in this journey I think all of us are on. So I think what I'd like to do, since we're using the word authenticity, and I think that's something that gets used a lot, people, I want to be authentic. I thought maybe we might start with, how are we defining the word today for this discussion?
Okay. So I do want to preface by saying that the more I'm learning in how we present and define things is also coming from defining and claiming that this is more from a Western perspective.
Okay.
And the Western mind, because for the past nearly 40 years, I've been sitting with clients and students and looking at their self-growth, their self-movement, their sense of discomfort, their sense of bringing ease and peace. But it is in a Western culture.
Okay.
Just a kind of preference with that. But I do think of authenticity about how is it and in what part of myself am I in alignment with my beliefs, my actions, and my words?
Okay.
So where am I coming from? That heartfelt core, maybe we would call it core sense of self. So along the way, some philosophers may have said, or Shakespeare has said, like, be true unto thyself, or to thine own self be true. Or
Right.
Socrates says, know thyself. Right. But he also says, one thing I know is that I know nothing.
Right. So, okay. So and one of the ways I have kind of defined authenticity with my clients has been a sense of being in alignment. So I like that, my beliefs are in alignment with my behaviors. We know that can be difficult to talk about, the literature and the philosophy. I believe, Paul says, I know the things I want to do, and I know the things I don't want to do, yet I do the things I don't want to do, and I can't do the things I do want to do.
Right.
And I do think I've seen for clients, so I've seen for me, right, this sense of I don't feel that congruence. I don't feel that alignment I would like to have. Mm-hmm. Because I can't seem to get my behaviors and values to line up the way I'd like them to. And, who am I able to be true to myself? So, okay. I think that's really important to know what we're talking about. I kind of like that.
Bryan, one other thing I'd add to it, like for artists or creative types people, it's like when I'm in that flow.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think flow, and of course, I think we can all have opportunities to experience flow. And I could go off on a whole tangent on how I think people don't access their creativity enough. So, but that may be part, that may be part of that sense of authenticity is, am I able to access my creative self? So, God, we have a big topic today. Well, so let's think about that. I want to go on. I've decided I'm going to be brave and go on this courageous journey. What are some of the questions like that you find are good or important to start opening that up? We're going on this journey kind of into the depths of ourselves. What do you find are some of the good questions for that?
So I think the first thing to realize is a lot of what we're doing is on automatic pilot.
Okay.
So that's why I phrase it the curious voyage. Is if we start to get questions, if we start to get curious, if we start to maybe like keep a journal by asking myself certain daily questions, I'm going to start to see patterns and habits, and that can give me clues to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I may want to just start like with what is my intention for today?
Okay.
Or what am I looking forward to? And then looking at the end of the day, what did I learn from myself or others? How did I fulfill what I was hoping to for today? What may I have done differently?
Okay.
Just doing that kind of questioning of really, I'd like to say from a space of, observing and describing, not going along self-judgment. Or, and sometimes when we start this kind of questioning, we feel like, I don't know.
Right.
So just even if you keep asking a question, over time, something comes. Like, I don't have to know the answer right away, but I'm getting into a habit. I'm starting to change. Like if I'm always looking like this way, and then I just slowly start to turn, and now I'm going to look this way, or I'm going to look in a broader direction, like expanding my perspective. And so a good question might be, how may I see this differently?
Okay. Right.
Or it might be like, that's my perspective. If I was putting myself in the other person's shoes, one of those, like, how might that look if somebody treated me that way?
Right.
Or if I was in that situation? Those kinds of questions, I think, help. And actually, they do say that journaling is a great way to reduce our stress and improve even our immune system.
Right. Well, I find journaling to be very powerful, and well, depends on the client. Some clients I'll try to sell them in different ways because there can be resistance. I find though, kind of what worked for me is to think about journaling is this idea that I'm bringing more of my brain to bear on the problem, and I'll say to clients, have you ever asked a question and when you heard yourself ask the question, you knew the answer?
Yeah.
Like, well, what happened there? It's like, well, you used more of your brain on the problem. And I find journaling is a great way to get out of just kind of being in our head, get it out. And having had the experience of writing in a journal and coming back 2 days later and thinking, I don't even remember writing that.
Right. Yeah.
But that's going on inside of me because that came out of me. I love kind of we talk about going beyond the surface. I really conceptualize people like a river. And we spend so much time looking at the surface of the river, but rapids are caused by rocks in the river. The flow of the river is the banks and the river bottom. And so I think it's like, are we going to have the courage here to put our heads underwater and kind of see what's down there, driving the river? Can I ask these questions? Like, what is my intent for today?
Right.
And I'm going to reflect on that. Well, I had these intentions for today, but I didn't behave that way at all. Isn't that it? And then not be judging. I love you saying, I'm not going to be judging about it. I'm going to ask, like, well, why did that happen? Wonder what happened that caused me not to behave as my stated intentions.
And sometimes what I learned in the journey myself is that my priorities changed. Like I had an intention for something, but yet other things took precedence and they really needed to get my attention first.
Right.
So there's multiple purposes and reasons why I didn't get to something. But if the other piece to look at is my motives and my needs. So when we're starting to ask ourselves these types of questions, if we begin to look at what was that I intended to do that, maybe I didn't get to it, but what was really my motive behind that intention?
Right.
What was the motive behind what I did do? Was that in this service? So talking about like my authentic self and getting to my authentic self, like, was that from a manipulative point of view perspective, or is that from a real need?
Right.
Or is that from a neglecting a need? So I like to open it up and ask people like, well, what is it that you really needed? So that also helps us reduce any sometimes shame or guilt.
Right. Okay, that makes some sense. So yeah, and I kind of as we kind of think about those feelings, as we're going on this journey, or we have those moments, right, when we say, okay, this is kind of a moment of authenticity. What do you kind of see that feels like, or what's the experience of when we can kind of touch on being authentically ourselves?
Okay. So when I'm authentically myself, I feel, talk about the river. I feel like I am kind of floating in that river, in that ebb and flow, and I'm going with this stream of life. But when I'm more authentically myself, I'm not hitting up against the rocks and the rapids don't feel as strong. And I think that's because things flow easier when I'm coming from a certain state of truth. So I was thinking about something when I was reflecting on our time together. I was recalling a workshop that I was going to go to, and it was on You Matter. And so there was going to be a talent show. So I was like, well, I have no talents, and and I'm not going to sing. I can't play an instrument. I'm not going to do this. But the more I was in my cocooned, normal self-talk, quote, normal self-talk, I was feeling like I was being kind of selfish and stingy with myself, because I was just going around with this idea of like, I can't and I won't.
Right.
But I love to move in my room by myself in the morning to some music. And I was doing it that morning, and I thought, I could do a dance. Why can't I just do a dance? I don't have to sing. I love to move. So I made up this little dance to this song, How Can Anybody Ever Think of You as Anything But Beautiful? And it goes on and on. And it's a beautiful song that I once actually did sing for a group, but I really knew the group. These people I did not know so well.
Right.
So I did the dance, and sure enough, they asked me to join the dance ministry and people liked it. And I thought, that's my authentic self. When I'm out of my internal verbiage and I'm in that flow of I can versus I can't or I won't, but I can or I can with support, then I feel free, then I am happy, then I'm connected. It's much more joyous. So I just want to share that story.
Oh, I love that story. Well, I love that for a couple of reasons. One of course is that's always evidence, folks, that just because we're therapists, we don't struggle with these same problems of being human. I've had a client say to me, you see a therapist? I'm like, yeah. I've got my own things I got to work on, but also just the beauty of I'm going to go I dance like I dance and nobody's watching, as they say, right?
Right.
Dance.
Well,
dance
that's
like
true. I was dancing in my room. Nobody
Right.
watches.
But I'm gonna be willing to kind of be that authentic self to other people. I feel like so often we inhibit our expression of our authentic self, not just to other people, but to ourselves in private, because we have some sense of, well, what if this authentic self gets rejected? I'm being very vulnerable. I'm gonna put this part of myself out there. And there may be some people that reject it. My experience has been those people who spend more time living authentically amongst others, those people are respected and envied
Mm-hmm.
by the rest of us, because we're like, wow, they just seem so themselves.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking to a client about when two people are in a relationship, if one person has the awareness, it's like hold the awareness for that authenticity and that compassionate dialoguing, and the other will be able to meet you there. But if you go down to their level of awareness or their defensive protective, and you have the capacity to see the difference, then go for the difference, because that will definitely help you. And over time, that can also help the other.
Right.
You know?
It's a live by example.
Right, exactly. And I think that what's coming up is, tomorrow's Thanksgiving. And I was writing an article for a blog about a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was, and realizing how often do we go back into our family systems and we go back into our habits,
right,
of how we are in those family systems. And I'm not being my authentic self. Like, I'm sitting here having this wonderful conversation with you, but can I feel that alive? Like you asked about the feelings. Can I feel that alive and that free when I'm back at that dining room table, that I never felt that alive and free at least, and I'm just speak for myself in that
right.
moment, in this moment. And what am I doing, and what is the difference? And how can I take one small step this holiday season to shift a little more authenticity at that table? And I went to Starbucks that morning, and I'm overhearing these two ladies talking about like their little survival kit for the family time with each other. And I was like, yeah, I just wrote about that. It's like, I can't wait to see you. I can't wait to see you. Oh, I hate it here. Then it's like, oh, I can't wait to see you next year. It's like this struggle of the time together. And so I just want to invite people to, one thing that helps is to think about the gratitude. They talk in neuroscience about how gratitude is a way to help us rewire our brain. And it is a time of Thanksgiving. And I gave a client an exercise a couple of years ago for this time to look around the room and see something that he sees the essence or what they're grateful for each person at that table. And it changed the experience he had.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I'm a big believer in practicing gratitude. And again, you talk about the wisdom of the ages. If you look at cultures across the world, they all figured out practicing gratitude is a good way to go.
yes.
And now we've got the neuroscience to back it up. Hay fever season.
Yeah.
Well, so we're talking a little bit. So we know there's kind of these great advantages to getting to be more authentic. What stops us, right? What keeps so many of us for pursuing this journey?
So if we go back to that dining room table metaphor, is wanting to feel connected. So we are really wired to be connected as humans. Okay. And in the Curious Voyage, I mentioned this article that was in Scientific American, and it was a scientist, Michael Lieberman, who talks about our need for social connection. But in that process, that need and that way of connecting is in our frontal lobe. He also talked about like this Trojan horse in our brain, that we are so deeply influenced by people in our social network. So part of what stops me is my culture, the habits, the way everybody else is, the norms. And some of this is so embedded in our bones and in our blood and generational that we're not always aware of that.
Right.
And so often you hear people say, well, that's how we do it, or that's how we do it in my family. So we don't even question it.
It's just part of the riverbed.
It's part of the riverbed. It's part of the soil underneath the river. Right. And
yeah, and it is amazing. It's like, well, the family does it this way because it's worked for the family. It's been a survival mechanism for the family.
Right. Or nobody's asked.
Yeah. But do I need to keep doing it? Do I need to keep doing that? And if I don't, I think for me, one of the things is with any client is this behavior's been a survival mechanism, and we're talking about giving that behavior up. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? And if it's a family behavior or an institutional behavior, am I going to get rejected by the institution? What's going to be my security? We evolved as hunter-gatherer tribal creatures. Getting kicked out of the tribe was a death sentence.
Yes. But for some of us, being in the tribe is also a death sentence.
Yes. Well, now, yeah, we've got the ability to go build our own new tribe now.
Right. Or find the tribe that's already built in other arenas.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we have to fully leave our other tribe. Like, I wouldn't want people to feel like it's an either or. It's not an either or. Right. It's the pacing and the kind of like that gas brake pedal situation. It's like, how can I live in both worlds and know what I can and can't, and know that I will be rejected and thrown out if I do this or that, but I'm freer here. So I have to go with what is.
Right.
Sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking a lot about, I think, some of the science that we see, and some of the neuroscience. So, and that part always fascinates me. I really do feel like, to a large degree, from a behavioral health standpoint, we're kind of like, attaching leeches and worried about the four humors, from physical. There's so much we're understanding. So as we kind of talk about the neuroscience, what would you say are some of the challenges, kind of facing our discipline as we try to make it a scientific discipline and where we're headed?
Yeah, I think that there's a few things, where there's some things that science can't explain.
Right.
That is human nature. So there are this intersectionality between sometimes science and maybe quantum physics goes closer there, but science and religion, or science, like saying there was an article in Psychology Today not so long ago, is like, where's God? Like, there's a part of our brain that's God, and where is that? And it's been a question forever.
Right.
And the question of like, where is the mind? And then we used to even think in terms of the memory, like it's a very linear place in our brains, but it's not now. So I think that if we just stick to something has to be proven by research before we can use it in our profession.
Right.
We're really restricting the capacity of the healing possibilities, because some things that have been around for over 10,000 years that indigenous people have done, other cultures have done, other societies have done, and it's worked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
But
I
if we can't do anything, and this is happening a lot with somatic experiential kinds of therapies, if we have to wait for more and more research before we're allowed to do something, I don't know where like that give and take to keeping ethically okay and all of that is,
right.
but I think that that's where the restriction lies.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. I actually, in training new therapists, one of the things I pointed out is that we have a very technique, tool-driven culture.
Right.
And we have lots of benefits of that. This ability for me to talk to you over the internet and record this, and I mean, we put people on the moon and there's space and all that's great. And therapy has some mystery to it. And it's relational and it's process driven and in some ways not Western reductionist breakdown.
Right.
It's maybe a more Eastern way of thinking about things. And I know from my personal practice that there's something about the process of having a safe relationship that's accepting and not judging gives the client the room to grow. And I just don't see any way to be a therapist, right? Where I have to put I would say I've got to put trust into the idea that the client is the best, most knowledgeable source about themselves in the world, right? And
Yeah.
what's that innate wisdom that the client has that we're trying to access?
I think, Ryan, what you're speaking to also is that we as therapists need to be being human. And, if you think about that, we talk about this a lot in the brain spotting, the posture of the relationship and how the therapist is with the client. It's like going back to that holding that little one in that eye to eye connection, that skin to skin, that bonding,
Right.
that mirror neurons, they call, like they talk about it. But when somebody mirrors back to you, I see you, I believe in you, I know that you are the best, quote, doctor of anybody and anything for yourself. And I'm going to sit here and trust your brain and body to know exactly what it needs. Of course, supporting you within a window of tolerating whatever you're going through. But when I fully trust and believe in you, then I'm offering that up for you to start to do that for yourself.
Right.
And you may never have gotten that or heard that or known that before. But if I sit here and I just think like, you're amazing. And the brilliance, if we talk about the survival mechanism, and is a brilliant mechanism our brain has to offer us. However, maybe it worked way back when we needed it. We may not need it today like we did then.
Right. But you survived. You got to today. Congratulations. You survived. You're here.
I know, it's a miracle. Like I sit in front of people and I hear what they've gone through, and it's like, and you can sit here and talk to me and you drove here. Like that's miraculous and wonderful.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we see and I've seen this a lot with people who've had some sort of trauma. Their response to how they manage to deal and survive the trauma can be very self-blaming.
For sure.
Right. And so I found that trauma, especially if we look at stuff that's very well, I'd say all trauma's got a developmental nature to it because it changes the brain. But when we talk about more traditional developmental trauma, helping them have a better understanding of that. Okay, you've survived, you got to here. now do we want to do something else, can be very powerful, because I'm not just this basket case bad guy.
Right.
And so when we think about this, the authenticity and developmental trauma, where do you see kind of an intersection there in this area?
I do have to say the gift of brain spotting is when somebody's in their process, they start with something that's troublesome to them. They feel it in their bodies. They're gazing in an eye position, and they're going into this like focused mindfulness space of their brain and body, just either sensation, feeling, memories popping, pictures flipping. There is that reorganization in the mind.
Right.
And I think that that's where the authenticity meets. So whether you're doing a brain spotting or you're doing some other way of processing, but when we can clear out from our bodies the physiological memories of the traumas, or if we can reorganize in whatever process or therapy you're practicing, we can reorganize our way of understanding and perceiving and thinking and knowing that was then and this is now. Because if I don't somehow click that shift, then the present and the past are like still the same. So if I can find whatever therapy that you're doing, if you find a space of then and now, then I can have then this certain level of compassion for myself of then. And the same way you as the therapist, you're sitting there and you're feeling this believing in me, I can believe in myself more. And then my authentic self starts to come back on board from the place of I'm not living from that same protective posture.
Right.
So I have more access to my whole creativity that I'm not if you want to talk about energies, like I'm not tightening up my energy for survival anymore. So I have it to thrive.
Right. And you have that energy to do something else with.
Right.
Right. I don't need to be in a survival crouch anymore. The actual threat has passed.
Right.
And so now I can do something different.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. I think that's very powerful. So I know that sometimes I think that not everybody has the financial resources to maybe find a therapy, but they may identify themselves as needing help. Do you have any advice for folks that you've seen? It's like, what are some ways I might be able to start this journey of authenticity on my own without having to go pay somebody?
Right.
Obviously, one might be get the book Curious Voyage, a rule breaking guidebook to authenticity.
I can just show it
Yeah.
to people if they want to see it.
And I'll have a link to it in the goodies down below.
Yeah, because in the book I have the resource page, and on the resource page I do have some questions. Like if you wanted to, the way the book is set out, it's like a voyage. So each chapter takes you and has a lot of working tool inquiry meditations and inquiry questions. And you're going from, looking at your beliefs, your value systems, different meditations to help you go from that negative little voice inside to a more positive way, and then freeing up your body. So on the resource page, there's things that you could pair up. You can do it in a book club. You can do it with a friend, who you feel trusting.
Right.
To. So those are some ways just from that as a resource. And, the 12-step programs, if anybody falls into one of the 12 steps, whether you were an adult child of alcoholism, or if you have any addictive behaviors yourself, but even if you just got some of the 12-step literature and read that in conjunction with this is, it's a beautiful path for healing.
I think the 12 steps are useful for all of us. It's good,
Yes.
Good, healthy living broken down into 12 simple steps, because as human beings, we're not very good at taking care of ourselves. Going
Right.
back to the authenticity, I do have this feeling that as humans, we have this sense that if people knew the real me, I'd be rejected.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, but because I'm not in touch with the real me, I have difficulty fully connecting to other people.
For sure.
And we short circuit that need to be connected to other people because we can't get connected to ourselves.
Right. But if there is like one person you felt like I could try this. Oh, the other thing I have is on synthesis.teachable is a class on the journal.
Okay.
So I take people, the journal is filled with another kind of journey through exercises. And I literally did for about a month the journal, the morning and the evening questions every day with a friend of mine. And we found it so helpful, just so like the 12-step program where you have a sponsor, if you have a friend and you can share your morning and your evening entries, it's a great support. And we've discovered a lot about what we weren't thinking by asking each other to take it a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say
ultimately having somebody to hold you accountable on your journey.
Yeah, and also because we heal in community.
Yeah.
We talked today about trauma. It's like with trauma, it's like so much healing can happen in community. Mm-hmm. I know, like at the trainings for brain spotting trainings, when I do a demo, you can do stuff in a demonstration that I don't think you can do the same level of work in your office when you have 30 plus other therapists just holding space for your healing, right? Or 30 other people.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. And one of the things we kind of building on that, what can we do to help other people with their authenticity is we need to give folks the space without judging. Yes. And give folks the space without, when somebody says something that's like anxiety provoking and ourselves, let that happen and not try to shut it down. I've talked to too many clients who've had trauma, who've tried to express what happened and how they felt. And they say to me, you're the first person who's just kind of let me tell this story without trying to make me feel better or, put a silver lining on it or anything else, that I think a great power of presence that we can be, yes, just for each other, is to help give people that room to hurt.
It reminds me of like when somebody has died, we bear witness to another person's pain. Mm-hmm. But these are many little or big deaths that we've experienced in our own lives. Yes. Like things were a certain way and then they're not that way. That's a death. And for somebody to be able to like come to you and you're just sitting there holding space and bearing witness is such a gift.
It's very powerful. And culturally, as a culture, we don't do well with death itself.
Right.
They've been dead for 6 months. Why are you still upset? Well, because grief is a lifelong process. Thank you. And heaven forbid then is a society or as a culture, we acknowledge these little deaths.
Yes.
I remember in graduate school learning about Adler and Adler's concept of kind of the narrative and where we're headed. It's like, oh, my narrative's gotten off track. It's a point of grief.
Right.
Life's not going to go the way I thought it was going to go.
Right.
And it's a grieving point. And if we don't acknowledge that grief and we don't get through it, then we get stuck. It becomes one more rock dropped into our river someplace. Mm-hmm. And then we wonder why we have rapids.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's very powerful. And it's amazing to me, as we've talked about this. Where we're at is in the search for authenticity is really not something I'm doing. It's something we're doing.
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Well, now I'm excited. I've got to read your book. I haven't read your book yet. So
Thank you.
yeah,
You have a copy though, right?
I don't think it's gotten here yet, but that's
okay.
that's the mail. Right now everything's all akimbo. But I am looking forward to reading it, and just really appreciate you coming on today to talk to us.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
And yeah, it's really cool. I had to took some quick notes of things to say to my clients while you were talking. So it's like, okay, I got to jot these down. So yeah, well, I will have all your information down below in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, great. And you have the teachable class too for the journal. I'll just shoot that over to you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
And and for our viewers, of course, it's a YouTube video. I got to say it: like, share, and subscribe. Leave a voice in the comment to make the YouTube to make the YouTube algorithms happy. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.